And a mouth right at the end.
6662.
M1 carbine power.
Unload, show clear.
So the M1 carbine has two schools of thought behind it. There are some people who absolutely love the carbine. And I'm talking about veterans, people who have used them.
Yes.
Like in bad places.
Not this stupid crap. They actually used them in combat.
Right.
Yep.
Some of those guys loved the carbine, and some of them, like quote we started with, detested the carbine. And it's interesting to see how there are these two schools of thought. And I think the rationale behind that, it makes sense because you've got the guys who are on the very front lines using this as a combat rifle. You know, there's bad guys there, and we're going to shoot them right now with our rifle.
Which was not the intended purpose of this design when it was pushed into service.
No.
Not really.
And then you have the guys who did have this rifle for its intended purpose. And those are guys like drivers, artillery crews, mortar crews, guys with bazookas. Someone where you want a backup weapon. Your main job is some sort of light weapon or support weapon. But you need something in case a squad of Germans or a squad of North Vietnamese comes over the hill when you're not expecting it.
Better than a pistol.
Definitely better than a pistol.
But not the big mass and giant M1 Garand that's going to be weighing you down while you're trying to get in and out of a car or move around a mortar.
So it lets guys, I think, even the reason it's better than a pistol is you can shoot this a lot better with a lot less training than a pistol.
And I would argue, by the way, even though I seem to be giving a very negative image of the M1 carbine, that if you said you can take this 1911 or you could take this with a 15-round magazine, I would still take this.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of it as literally a military-issue car gun, truck gun.
Or a PDW. Although they didn't use that term in World War II. But
no.
Yes.
But that's pretty much the rationale behind issuing this. So the guys like Mortar Squad dudes who carried this, and they probably shot it in practice and recreationally behind the line and not much else, adored them. This is a fantastically light rifle. I mean,
it's incredibly easy to carry this thing around. You don't even really notice you have it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got no recoil. They're fun to shoot. Fantastic. If that's your experience with the gun, of course, you're going to love it.
And as long as it functions when you need it, and there's a German popping out of the brush right there in the hedgerow, and you open up with it, good enough.
It's the kind of thing where if you get one malfunction in a box of 50 rounds, which is about what we've been getting, if you're shooting it recreationally on the range, you don't really notice that. You don't care about it. Maybe you don't even remember it.
Now, I'll tell you, like I've noticed, I've shot a lot of M1 carbines, been around a lot of M1 carbines, the majority of them being USGI, now this new Inland, and now a couple Universals too. So what I would say is this, I have not seen one of them reliable. Now, someone out there has got a different one. I'm telling you, someone's got one that works great. Maybe a bunch of you do. But I've seen them come out to the two-gun match. I've seen them at the Camp Perry match. I've read anecdotal stories about them not working properly. And I've experienced it personally where it cost me gold to bronze in the 2007 year when it malfunctioned at the rapid fire string.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was nothing. It's a stupid game where I'm just sitting there on a range, right? But when the gun malfunctions and you're actually trying to get a score and you're under the clock, you'll never forget that and you start to hate the gun.
And I sure as hell, if a bad guy pops up and you need to shoot him and that's when the gun decides to malfunction, you're going to go bash that thing against
And I found stories as well from another book where the guy did do that. He brought the gun up and it went click. You will never forget that, and you will hate that rifle or thing forever. So these things are subjective, but that being said, I have to say my experience is that these guns are iffy.
Yeah. And so when we got this Repro, the question is, would they have gotten the kinks worked out of it? Did they figure out how to make an M1 carbine that runs reliably all the time? Not 90-95% of the time, but 100%. The answer is no. It runs pretty much like a GI carbine.
Historically accurate.
Yep. Unfortunately, at that point, to me, I have to wonder why I would choose to spend the money on this. MSRP for these, which appears to be pretty accurate to street prices, between $1,000 and $1,100. Now, yeah, it's brand new. You know it's going to run. I mean, it's going to run 90 to 95% of the time, but you're not going to have major problems with it. However, I can still go buy a GI carbine for $700 to $900 for a shooter. Now, obviously, if I want a particularly desirable manufacturer or a really beautifully nice example of the gun, I'm going to pay more. But if I'm looking for a shooter plinker gun, I can get an original, authentic GI one cheaper than I can get a new production.
I'll tell you what, I have to say, and I'm not trying to bash anyone, but I've never seen a GI one where the sight did this.
Yeah.
I've never seen the rear sight come loose. Now, that's possible. It's happened on the GI guns too, but I've never seen that. And that, to me, is not fine. That is a serious problem. Now, the gun's reliability, losing, having a malfunction out of 50 rounds, well, that's historically accurate.
Yep.
This sucks, and I'm sure they'll fix it for you if you ask them to. I'm not saying they wouldn't.
Right.
But
I don't want to deal with that in the first place.
Shouldn't happen.
Yeah. I should point out, because I know people are going to ask about this. First off, this gun is thoroughly broken in. We are not the first people to do a T&E experience with this exact gun. This came to us from a different reviewer, and he got it from a different reviewer before that.
And it may well have been even abused before we received it. For all we know, someone dropped it on a concrete floor on that site. Well, I have no idea.
No, this was not a problem before.
Oh, it started on you.
It started,
okay.
And I know this because I have footage of the exact stage in the two-gun match where
it occurred to you during the course of fire. Okay.
However, my point being, our malfunction issues are not the fault of the gun not being worn in properly.
Sure.
In addition, I went through 3 different types of ammunition. I used tool ammo, which is about the cheapest I could find, and it actually ran pretty well. It ran as well as anything else.
It was the same.
I used Aguila, and I used Cellular and Below. Now, I've read some reviews of this where people said that they work perfectly with Hornady Critical Defense. I'm not buying Hornady Critical Defense to shoot in an M1 carbine.
So maybe it likes hotter ammo?
I don't know.
You can't answer
Maybe.
that. Okay.
Magazines are a perpetual plague of a problem for M1
Worth bringing up
carbines.
to the viewers. Mark, what magazines were you using?
Mixture.
Okay, so
including the one that came with the gun. I've got some that are GI, as far as I can tell. Sometimes it's even difficult to tell authentic GI mags from really good reproduction mags.
You could say that you safely had a mix of commercial and USDA mags in the mix of the testing.
Yep. Okay. And I had MALFs with every single mag that I've got.
Okay. All right. There's little nitpicky things I would say. I would say the front sight seam, or whatever that line is on the front sight, if it's not a seam, that's beyond nitpicky. The rear sight being loose is beyond nitpicky. There are seam lines on the gun from the casting.
Pretty much all the parts. You've got one right up here.
I hate to say this, but it's like if you're buying a reproduction of a historic firearm because it has the panache of being this iconic gun, seam lines to me, like that, kind of detract.
And especially on a $1,000 gun.
Agreed.
If this were a $500 carbine,
that would be different.
I'd give it more leeway.
And this is really weird, but
it doesn't smell right.
It doesn't smell right. If you've shot a lot of vintage U.S. weapons, the M1 Garand, the carbine, there is a way that the wood was finished and the type of wood that was used, which has a distinctive scent.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice that when we first started shooting it until we walked around and picked up one of the originals. I'm like, oh man, that smell is like...
No, it wasn't that.
It was a James River.
We were at SHOT Show, and we were looking at these, and we also happened to walk past James River's booth, and they also make one, and they make a more expensive one. If I recall, theirs is like $1,500. And we picked that up to take a look at it, and Carl immediately went, both of us really went, oh, that's got the smell.
It's literally...
And then we went back and went, the inland one didn't have the smell.
What a stupid thing in a review, but it doesn't have the potpourri. It's missing potpourri. So seam lines... Sights are wonky.
Some quality issues here.
And it doesn't have that potpourri vintage U.S. scent.
Yeah.
Goofy, but true.
Now, we wanted to actually do a side-by-side comparison with one of the James River guns. They told me they were going to send one. It never showed up, so we ran out of patience and we're just doing
Maybe someday.
this guy.
Maybe someday.
I suspect theirs will also be just slightly unreliable.
You know what? That's complete conjecture. We haven't fired it. We can't say that whatsoever. This is weird. Everyone denigrates the Universals. The Universal is the closest I've ever seen to one working reliably. It's got the dual recoil springs. I've seen a Universal that worked better than this.
Okay.
And that's the only one I ever saw. I was like, this one's almost a keeper. It kind of works. So I don't know where that reputation came from because the one I saw worked.
So a couple of points on features of this. This has a push button safety.
Yes.
They did eventually replace that with a lever safety because the push button was too close to the push button magazine release.
Yes.
And there were guys in combat who brought the gun up, took it off safe, or thought they did, and instead dumped the magazine on the ground. That's
Mars attacks.
Not a good thing. Yes, exactly.
Mars
Jack
attacks.
Black.
Yeah.
It also has a bayonet lug, which is something that was added in 1945. And of course it has this fully adjustable, when you probably don't want it to be, rear sight.
When did that come into play?
I don't know offhand. I'd have to look it up.
Ian doesn't know an answer.
I know.
My guess is, and I can't recall, I thought this was late war as well.
Probably.
So you've got a late war sight assembly, or mid-war, late war. You've got a late war bayonet lug.
Yep.
And an
early
war safety. I don't know that that's not correct.
Yeah.
But it's just a little bit mismatched, in my opinion. But that's not a
categorical fact. Yeah. The safety's not an issue for what this gun is today.
No.
This is a recreational gun.
It's a plinker match shooter.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it is fun. It is absolutely fun. I know it's going to be hard to even say this, but we're not trying to dig too hard on this thing. They're fun guns. Carl hates them because it screwed him out of his second gold medal, and he's got very little patience for that sort of thing. I find this enjoyable to shoot.
You know, if this actually does print better on paper, they have a market here, with the exception of the sight problem. They have a market here maybe for the Camp Perry M1 carbine matches. If this thing groups better,
yeah,
cool, go get your gold medal. And you know what, little things like that, well, that you'd want to fix, but little things like that aren't going to stop you from being able to do that in the long run.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a market. But for a plinker or like run and gun shooter,
you know, it's also cool that I can buy that Tula or sometimes a Gila for like the same cost as almost 9mm.
True.
It's the ammo is actually pretty cheap.
Yeah,
I remember a while ago looking at the ammo, and you know, all of the ammo was really unfortunately expensive.
So in summary, this is probably getting long. Buy or not buy?
No.
No?
No.
No.
For me, now, you're not going to buy it because you hate the M1 carbine.
You're using hate in a strong way. I'm not a fan of the M1 carbine.
You don't particularly desire to own one.
If I were coerced into buying an M1 carbine, I would say that this would not be my choice at this point.
Right.
Given the amount of money that it costs, I would go spend the money to go buy a USGI one to have the actual vintage thing.
Yep.
Or I would buy some El Cheapo POS Universal that hopefully worked and just blast.
And
I would do one or the other, but this is neither fish nor fowl.
You kind of got the temperament to buy a cheap Universal that doesn't quite work and tinker on it until it does.
Yeah, some JB weld and something and then blast with it. But this is neither fish nor fowl. It's not the vintage gun, and it's not the cheapo, but it has some of the problems of the vintage gun and not a lot of improvements thereof.
Right. Yeah. And if it were me, and I may at some point buy an M1 carbine. I actually don't own one right now. But what I would want to get is an early model GI. I want one with just the flip safety and no bayonet lug.
But not the god-awful Paratrooper thing.
No, we should touch on that. They make a Repro Paratrooper stock. They look cool. A lot of guys think they're awesome because they look cool. That is like the worst folding stock ever conceived by any military force.
I totally understand why they did it. It was so the guys could jump with them and it made the thing smaller. But if you try to shoot with that thing, it is a definition of awful.
Yeah, especially if you're left-handed. The stock is asymmetrical and it's all on the right side. You're going to shoot it right-handed or unpleasantly.
You didn't have any nuns beat that problem out of you?
No, I didn't.
No, you should have.
Escaped
Then
that.
you would have been better off with a Paratrooper carbine.
No one's ever better off with a Paratrooper carbine.
Fair enough.
So, if you're going to get one, absolutely, unless you just want it to hang on the wall and look awesome, or you're a reenactor and that's important specifically for that reason.
That's a niche market, that's different.
Do yourself a favor, get a full stock, don't get a Paratrooper.
So you can at least enjoy actually shooting it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would say no. I hate to say it, but I would not either. I would spend the money on a USGI gun.
You know, this is, I would say in today's market, this is a recreational pistol caliber carbine. And if it's only the nostalgia of it being an M1 carbine that allows it to demand a higher price, if you want a fun plinker, you know, you can spend half the money and get a 9mm pistol caliber carbine that'll be every bit as fun.
Sure.
And to me, if you want the nostalgia, you can spend less money still and buy an original one.
Yep.
All right. Sorry, Inland. We like the effort, but that's where it is.
Yeah, I feel bad giving a somewhat negative review, but it just is what it is, and that's what we want to do. We don't want to be dishonest with the viewer. So, not horrible. We've seen worse, but it's a near miss.
Yeah.
Near miss.
Kind of like a lot of my shots with it.
Anyways, I'd say that's a long video. So thanks guys for watching this. Hopefully you found this valuable and useful. And if you are looking for an M1 carbine, maybe this was in your market, and maybe it still is. It could be. Maybe it shoots well on paper, and the American Rifleman 2-inch thing is legit.
There's still people who are going to want it.
Yeah, it's fine. And we hope that they have success, and maybe they'll improve some of the things that we found that weren't quite right.
Yep.
That's always the goal. So thanks for letting us shoot this thing and give it a whirl. Thanks for watching, share, and let us know what you think.